See how it's leaning? I mean, it is leaning. Folks, I got this wagon in 1992, 1876 Studebaker. I remember it well. It was about a year after my father had passed away, and I would have loved for him to have been with me that day when we picked this up. Drove to a ranch down at Spur, Texas. I'd sort of had the word out as I was sort of looking for a chuck wagon that somebody might have that was in usable condition to where you didn't have to do a lot of work on it and you could just go to cooking on ranches. So I drove down Spur, visited with this fella, and he went out there and got the wagon, pulled it out of the barn. It was green and red with a white chuck box on the inside. Had all the poles. The fly was with it. We brought it back home, set it up. I'd never set up that particular fly, so it took just a little bit of doing to figure out what was going on. I ended up having to get new cedar posts all for the fly because these were all metal posts, and whew, they just way too heavy to tote down the road so many times. So ended up calling a good friend of mine, Bill Biffle, down there in Fredericksburg, and we got us some cedar, and we stripped all the bark off of them, put some pins in them, made them cedar posts. First time we set the wagons up was right here behind the barn. Cooked for a really, really important person, my mother, because she had taught me to cook and I wanted to cook for her first. The wagon had to do a little work on it right there at the first to sort of get the chuck box rearranged in the way that we wanted it, but it all in all, it was very usable in condition. Did do a little maintenance on the wheels sometime shortly after that before we went to our first ranch, but hey, it was a get and go deal and go to work. This ain't just something like you can run it down there to the automotive store and get it overhauled. It didn't. Then took all the drawers out of the chuck box, and let me see, this is 30-something years old that I've had it, which is an 1876 Studebaker chuck wagon. Hubs, undercarriage, they all still original. But folks, it is time to remodel. I mean, the floor in that old wagon is sort of getting some rotten spots in it. But you know how a plumber never gets time to fix his own leak? Sometimes a cook never gets time to fix his own wagon, but it's gonna happen now. We're gonna try to work day and night to where we don't miss no videos and get this back. And the first thing we're gonna do is probably take that chuck box out so I can get it out of the way to where we can get to the floor. Now, this deal, I done loosened it a while ago and that was a pain. Ain't no telling how many years it's been on it, that little slide bar that goes through there to hold that chuck box in, because I ain't had it out of there since 1992, and that's a long time ago. Now, will it even come out? I ain't got a clue. Looky there, something happened. So, this is one of them deals where if you got parts, you better save them, because it ain't like you're gonna run to the antique store and say, y'all got some parts for an 1876 Studebaker chuck wagon? It ain't gonna happen. So, don't lose none of them, don't misplace them. Y'all probably check back with me. They ain't no telling what's going on, but we're gonna try to take the chuck box out, take the sides off of it because we've got to replace the floor. But when we get all that off, then we'll be down there to the chassis and the wheels to where we can get it out there. We're going to power wash it. I'm going to let y'all in on a little secret. It's probably going to not be this color no more. And you heard that from me, the guy that might get to make the corporate decision on the color. You know, the reason I wanted to get a chuck wagon is I'd put in about 4 or 5 seasons out there in the Gila wilderness guiding elk hunters with my uncle. And I'd learned how to sort of master the art of Dutch oven cooking because nobody had ever taught me. It was just trial and error, but it was a little different at a higher altitude. And I'm thinking, you know, I remember seeing them old chuck wagons on ranches that I'd been on, and them old cooks cooking bread and cooking stuff and them things. And when I figured out sort of how to do that, I'm thinking, that's where I need to be, back on ranches cooking, because it's sort of where the heritage all started. I mean, I'd worked on the branding fire side of it, and now to get to work on the cooking fire side of it, I was looking to gain a respect from cowboys that knew I'd been in both places. So wasn't long after we got the wagon, hey, off to the first ranch we went for about 3.5 weeks down there south of Abilene, and it got in my blood really deep then to see what you could create and the things you got to see on a ranch, the people you got to meet. The scenery was some of the greatest, but it was just sort of put people in awe when you could just bring out a Dutch oven full of bread or full of a cobbler or something like that that you cooked right out there in Mother Nature's kitchen. And that was the draw to me to get back to the history to where it started. It's been one of them days, it has. It's been about 3 hours in for me, it has. A lot of moving parts to a wagon is, but you can see when you don't have time to really work on what you got, the rotting effect that will take place through here. I mean, it is there. This is supposed to just pull right out because it's got two little boards up in here that are sort of like channels that it runs in. So we'll see, will it come out there? We hope it does anyway. Well, we are hung up, Shan. Tune in later for another episode. That's what you call looking all the way back through there, Shan. Got in a bad wet spell many years ago, and a man should have fixed it for now, but there was a box sitting up here that leaked and all this water would get trapped in here, and that's what caused things to rot, which rotted against these sideboards over here, which makes the wagon really lean to the wrong direction if you're going around the curve. You know, when we talk about the history and where it all started, you know, the chuck wagon has not changed since old Cookie's time going down the trail, you know, really from the late 1870s till it phased out in the late 1890s, 1900s early. It's still the same design as what was all put together with grain boards took out the back of a wagon and a chuck box slipped in there. He would get the drawers and arrange them in the way that he wanted in the spaces that he wanted in a chuck box, and you fed cowboys, Meals on Wheels. That's what it was. And today when you look at a chuck wagon, there's really no difference in the way it's made, the way it's put together, or the use that it has. Sure, I have a lot more things to work with than old Cookie did, but all in all, it's the same thing. You see all these little U-clips here? They're what holds the bows in and get tight as the bows above the wagon, which holds the tarpaulin. All the leather here either fits a sledgehammer, pickaxe, or an axe. These are pine, but these support boards on the outside are oak or ash. A box goes on that one. Brake assembly is up there. So we're going to try to save this part of what we got going on. We're going to power wash it and see if we can't get that paint off. If we end up having to take them apart, it'll make the episode even longer and longer. You know, speaking of history, there wasn't a lot of cooks out there. I tried to remember the cooks that I knew, and I could sort of count them on one hand, the ones that were still cooking, that were still doing this as a tradition, not just as a hobby, something you could make a living at. And you know, when you're good at being a cook and cowboys recommend you, you can work all year round because it's a great circle that really the cowboy word passes through all the way back around. Hey, this guy's a good cook. You ought to hire him. So for me to get to play that part, to be a part of history as to pass something on down to maybe a younger generation, and I sure hope that there's a younger cook out there somewhere that thinks, I would love to get a wagon and start this. Well, you can see that there is a lot of pulled paint on there. Now, I don't know when this wagon actually got painted the first time, but I have peeled off yellow paint, red paint, green paint, sort of like a rainbow, I guess. But that stuff was on there. I'm sure it was old lead-based paint, and we've put a lot of stripper on there. Then we take the power washer to it. Then we take the sander to it, the scraper to it, the knife to it. But we're gonna get it all off there. We are, because under that wood, there's some great grain of oak and ash in there, and we want that to sort of stand out. So, hey, this old wagon needed some love long before it got it, and we're gonna give it to it today. And don't y'all like my outfit? Don't I look good? This is what you call my power washing outfit. So, hang on with me, because it's gonna get Western. Why restoration and repair now? Well, I'm just gonna guarantee you, it was needing doing probably about 5-6 years ago, but you get busy and you think, oh, that'll wait. We'll put that off. Always remember an old fella that used to work on windmills always used to tell me, I never got to work on my own. I was so busy, I was working on everybody else's. Update time it is. We got these 1x12s that were the sideboards on the wagons, and I was thinking to myself, we can power wash that right off there. We'll be in pretty good shape. Well, then I got to seeing how much this one was bowed. I mean, it's got a whole bunch of this in it. It is plenty crooked all the way across there. The front's bowed in. And I'm thinking, well, let's go get some 1x12 pine and let's just start over. Ain't no sense in wasting that water on a power washer. So we get them on here, but then you have to take all this hardware off. And about half of it don't want to unscrew, don't want to come apart. So then you get the jab saw and you just cut the top of them off, and then you start over and cut your board to shape. We're going from this to this. Yeah, this is more traditional Studebaker, old green color it is. And you can see what we call the standards in here that fit in these pockets that hold the two sideboards together. They're a little different grain. What are they? Y'all might recognize this, you might. This is some of that good mesquite that we make them spatulas out of. And you can see this is just bowed over here on the corner as it's rolled over. We do that right here on this little sander, roll them across. My son Jace, he done rounded them off the edge there. Then we repaint the clips, put them up there, the old one as a pattern, and drill all the holes and hope you remember how it fits. Yeah. Now speaking of my son Jace, I want to show you what he put back together for me. That old wagon seat that we had was plenty wore out, it was. So he come back in here, planed me 2 pieces of oak together, put it back together. I just got these sanded off back to the original oak wood that was there, and I'll get them back on there tonight maybe. So it'll be sort of like in this position right here. And still waiting on floorboards we are, but I think they're coming tomorrow and we can start that. So, hey, long process, but we're so glad y'all come by. So in March, we pulled it in the barn, and I told Shannon, I said, we got to work on them floorboards. Now, to get to the floorboards, you have to take sideboards off. Chug box has to come out. And then when you've seen what was actually there, you're thinking, oh my gosh, how did I let it get in this shape? We should have been doing this like 15 years ago. So it was a pretty big undertaking, but it needed doing, and it's something that I really look forward to get it back to its original condition. Y'all ready to see it? Well, I didn't know y'all were still here. Don't quit me now. You know, we've come a long way, and there's a lot of stuff under here I ain't got fixed yet, so stay tuned for part 2, because you're going to see the finished product, and I'm sort of wanting to finish the product. Oh, thanks for helping, Sade. I didn't know you was a wagon repair dog, but hey, y'all bear with me. We'll get this done in the end. It may take a while, but it'll get there.